In 1995, newcomer Michael Bay enjoyed a considerable success with his directional debut Bad Boys. Bay would follow up that success with his next project, the smash hit action film The Rock, in 1996. The Criterion Collection would later release the film as a special edition on both Laserdisc and DVD, as part of their prestigious series of films, with a digital transfer supervised and approved by Michael Bay. Although a hit with fans and critics alike, The Rock would run into censorship troubles in various countries around the world. Two such countries that received edited versions of the film were the United Kingdom and Australia, with each territory receiving its own specially prepared cut version. In this edition of Cutting Edge, we'll be examining the cuts made to The Rock for the theatrical, VHS and DVD releases of the film in these two countries. Since 2006, films in Australia have been classified by the Australian Classification Board, the ACB, a statutory body based in Sydney. Formerly operating under the name of the Office of Film and Literature Classification, the OFLC, their principles for decision-making are set out in the National Classification Code, which is agreed by the Australian Government and the states and territories. There are 6 key ratings used to classify films for release in Australia. G. Suitable for general exhibition to all audiences. PG. Parental guidance suggested for under 15s. M. Mature content recommended for over 15s, but any age may attend. MA 15+. Restricted to over 15s, although under 15s may be accompanied by an adult. R18+. Restricted to adults over 18 only. X18+. Pornographic content that is restricted to adults over 18 only. It could be argued that the Australian censors have always been more lenient when it comes to screen violence, particularly in the lower age categories, than the UK's BBFC ever were. But however lenient they may appear to be from time to time, that attitude wouldn't be quite so apparent when The Rock came in for classification in 1996. The Rock had been passed in the United States with an R rating by the MPAA, which would be the standard uncut version of the film. This version was initially submitted to the Australian censors for theatrical classification in the summer of 1996, when they were still operating as the OFLC, where it received an R18+ rating for violence on June 5, 1996. But the distributors, Touchstone, were not happy with this classification. They appealed, arguing that an MA 15+ rating was more appropriate, but the censors stood by their initial conclusion. Since the Australian censors do not directly order cuts to films, Touchstone made cuts to certain scenes of violence themselves in the hope of receiving a lower classification. A modified version of The Rock was prepared and seen again by the OFLC on September 6, 1996, when it was awarded the lower MA 15+ rating. This would allow 15-year-olds and over to attend on their own, and under 15s to attend with an adult guardian. The main scene altered for the MA 15+ version was the shootout in the shower room. The uncut version plays as follows. For the cut version, the most explicit close-up shots of bloody bullet hits to bodies were replaced with alternate, less bloody footage. This method works well, allowing footage to be removed and replaced without altering the flow of the film's soundtrack, with the cut version playing thus.
Let's waste these fuckers. One last time, you order your men to stick to the right.
The next changes occur during the morgue scene. As Mason and Goodspeed enter the morgue, they are spotted by two soldiers. Mason quickly dispatches the first soldier by throwing a knife into his throat, quipping,
"You must never hesitate,"
before a firefight ensues with a second soldier. A slight change was made here, with the brief profile shot of a knife entering the soldier's throat being removed from the sequence. Seen here is a comparison between the uncut version of the sequence to the cut version.
"You must never hesitate." "You must never hesitate."
The second is a very subtle alteration at the end of the scene. As Mason and Goodspeed take cover from the second soldier's gunfire, Mason dispatches the remaining enemy by causing a metal tank to fall from the ceiling. The yelling of a soldier was trimmed slightly, along with the impact shot of the tank hitting the soldier's head, so that the impact happens off-screen. The final standoff between Hummel and his men was also cut, with alternate footage again being used to patch up some of the cuts. The brief impact shot to Sergeant Crisp's throat was removed, as well as a low-angled shot of a bloody hit Major Baxter receives in his torso. The shot of Baxter being shot was replaced with some less explicit and unique footage that doesn't appear in the uncut version, showing a frontal shot of Baxter juddering with no visible blood spurts. Hummel receiving two bloody impacts to his body were also removed entirely, although no alternate footage was used this time.
It's over. It's over.
The last change in the MA-15 Plus version occurs after Captain Darrow is propelled out of a window by one of Hummel's rockets. As Darrow falls to the ground, he becomes speared atop a fence post. The cut Australian version removes the brief sight of his body impaled on the post. Following these changes, The Rock was passed by the OFLC with an MA-15 Plus rating on September 6, 1996. Norway would also release this edited version for the film's theatrical run in that country. The MA-15 Plus version was released in Australia on both rental and sell-through VHS, despite the fact that the OFLC passed the film with an R18 Plus rating in December 1996 for video release. It was seen again in May 1999 for the initial DVD release of the film, and The Rock also received an R18 Plus this time round. On the face of it, the Australian DVD looked like the stronger purchase to potential buyers, sporting a higher rating than the cut video version of the film. However, the DVD was actually a clone of the edited UK version of the film, which restored footage missing from the Australian cinema version, hence the higher rating, but at the expense of other missing footage due to the BBFC's interference. The Australians were out of luck, with two different cut versions available on VHS and DVD, and still no uncut version on the market. A couple of years later, however, The Rock would once again be classified by the OFLC for a special edition DVD release in October 2001. The version classified was the uncut US version of the film, which was passed with an R18 Plus rating and released in Australia in early November 2001. 6 years later, the Blu-ray version of the film would also be released uncut under the newly formed ACB, with a downgrade under new classification guidelines to an MA-15 Plus rating. The situation regarding the UK releases of the film is different, with unique edits made to appease the BBFC. The Rock was initially passed uncut for UK theatrical release, earning a 15 rating on June 4, 1996. It was later submitted to the board in this uncut form for a video classification, but the BBFC demanded 6 cuts to preserve its 15 on video, before the same rating would be awarded. Some of the footage that was removed for Australia was also problematic for the British, but in the main, strong violence perpetrated by the hero of the piece was the issue for BBFC director James Furman and his team. Sean Connery was adapting his violent talents to the modern mode, throwing knives, breaking necks, and spraying bullets into the feet of opposing soldiers in the action-adventure The Rock. It would be interesting to speculate why screen heroes of the 90s have become so coldly callous. One day, perhaps, the question may be answered by social historians, but it is a trend that sits rather oddly with Britain's new culture of compassion. The majority of cuts made to the film in the UK occurred during the morgue scene. As Mason and Goodspeed enter the morgue, the BBFC objected to Mason's knife right off the bat, instructing the film company to remove entire sequence of Connery throwing knife into soldier's throat, cutting away after first soldier reacts and resuming as second soldier begins firing.
You must never hesitate.
General Hummel later comes across the dead soldiers and remarks to his team that,
"Well, there are 2 dead men here who strongly suggest you go finish the job."
this line could be seen as confusing to UK audiences, as only one man is seen to be killed in the cut version. The morgue scene received further changes for the UK video version, with the death of a second soldier edited to reduce the scene's sadistic edge. The BBFC instructed the distributors to reduce sight of bullets hitting soldiers' boots by cutting away after first shot of boots, removing 3 middle shots and reaction shot of victim, and resuming on last shot of single boot leading to shot of him falling. To further speed up the death of a soldier, the BBFC also instructed, immediately afterwards, remove reaction shot of Connery together with high angle shot of victim in agony, resuming on Connery rising into shot. And further still, when metal tank falls on agonized victim, remove reaction shot of zooming in to him screaming, resuming on low angle of tank falling. To cover up the missing reaction shot, the preceding shot of the tank falling from the ceiling was simply slowed down, with the sound of the soldiers screaming now played over the slowed down footage. About 20 minutes later, the next BBFC cut occurs. After Goodspeed is captured by another enemy soldier, Mason comes to the rescue by breaking the soldier's neck. The sound of bones cracking was removed from the soundtrack in the cut UK version.
Now let's go find some rockets!
I said shut the fuck up!
So what do you say you do the math? Hand over the gun, and let's go find some rockets!
I said shut the fuck up!
The final change requested by the BBFC occurs around 8 minutes later when General Hummel faces off against the 3 mutinous soldiers. A broad change was demanded by the BBFC here, stating, "When rebel soldiers kill general and supporters, remove blood spurts wherever possible." The resultant cuts remove 3 blood spurts in the censored version. Major Baxter gets shot as blood explodes from his shoulder in slow motion, whilst Hummel receives 2 bloody impacts. 2 of these 3 edits were made to occur right on the occurrences of muzzle flashes, presumably to try and hide the cuts. The results, however, are choppy and produce 2 rather obvious jump cuts in the footage, with both Baxter's and Hummel's positions suddenly shifting due to the cuts. One wonders why the alternate footage from the Australian version was not simply used instead.
It's over. It's over.
Following these alterations, The Rock was past cut with a 15 rating for a home video release on December 30th, 1996. With the use of substituted footage taken into account, the total amount of cuts amounted to around 15 seconds. Cut versions of the film were used for both the VHS release and the single-disc DVD that was released in June of 2001. The Rock was resubmitted to the BBFC in 2002 in its uncut version, and with James Furman departed from the board, the film was passed intact with a 15 rating on May 8, 2002. All the previous video cuts were waived, and The Rock was released as a 2-disc collector's edition DVD on June 24, 2002, which more or less mirrored the contents of a Criterion Collection release in the United States. The uncut version was also released on Blu-ray in July 2007, and is the standard version available in the United Kingdom.